the longing that builds in quiet. Ere she made contact, she had already wanted. Ere she wanted, she had already watched. And ere she watched, something profound inside her had already stirred. A woman's wanting does not start in the flesh, it starts in the mind, in the look that holds just long enough to breach a boundary, in the quiet where inquisitiveness starts to live, that instant when she sees you, while feigning she doesn't. A woman senses long before she comprehends. She observes silently the manner you move, the cadence of your breath, the timbre that exists beneath your voice. Each motion, each hesitation, each flash of control becomes a piece she keeps hidden deep in her thoughts. And when a man holds presence, the feminine does not reply with language. She responds with energy, because a woman's wanting is not viewed, it's felt. It shifts gradually, thrives on distance, and builds in the gap between what is spoken and what is withheld. A man's error is thinking that wanting starts with contact, but contact just stirs what her mind had already constructed in quiet. She does not want the flesh. She wants the enigma, the stillness in your look, the significance behind what you leave unspoken, the tightness you hold without clarifying. A woman wants what she cannot articulate, and that is the reason the foreseeable man will never be recalled. Because wanting is not born from ease, it's born from ambiguity, from the silent rush of not knowing your emotions, yet feeling that in some way you already grasp what she senses. A woman's wanting is like flames under ice. It sears, but it conceals. She doesn't show, doesn't clarify, doesn't pursue. She watches. And each void, each quiet, each measured hesitation gains significance in her realm. A woman does not want with her flesh. She wants with time. That's the reason the hasty man stirs nothing beyond superficial inquisitiveness. But the man who acts with steady assurance, who talks little, yet exudes authority, that man sows the seed of captivation. And captivation is the start of wanting. Before we proceed, let me know in the comments, where are you tuning in from and what is your age? I wish to know where the men are who grasp that real strength is not in the contact, but in the energy that comes before it. And if you're not currently in this fraternity, join us. Here, we investigate what few men venture to learn: the feminine psyche and the strength of masculine presence. Stage 1. Inquisitiveness. It all starts the instant she becomes aware of you. It is not wanting yet, not even appeal. It's just the quiet recognition of a new presence in her vicinity. Something stirs within her so softly that even she doesn't grasp it. A woman's inquisitiveness is like a faraway beacon. It doesn't illuminate the entire ocean, but it glows just enough to reveal the silhouette of something unfamiliar. She starts to watch, not with speed, not with a design. She gazes at the man when he is not watching. She hears the timbre of his voice, the manner he carries himself in a group, the steady assurance in his motions, and in that minor act of watching, something within her begins to stir. It's a small magnetic tug between her look and her mind. Because a woman does not want what she completely comprehends, she wants what mystifies her. And inquisitiveness is the initial step toward that captivation. She doesn't desire him yet. She just perceives that she might. It's the start of her mind, picturing him not as a partner, but as a potential. At this point, the man is still only a notion, but a notion with a fragrance, a cadence, a specific gravity. She observes him speak, move, grin, and she recalls specifics he would never think twice about. How he holds a glass, how he leans forward when someone speaks, how he seems perfectly at ease in his own silence. Her body hasn't reacted yet, but her mind has started to build. And when a woman's thoughts start to construct, time handles the remainder. Because inquisitiveness is the initial shift of her energy, the instant she starts to admit you to her personal world of thought, The inquisitive woman is like a person hearing a new tune without understanding why she enjoys it. She doesn't choose to sense, she just senses. And that simple feeling is perilous, because anything that starts without purpose is often what she can never manage. The astute man grasps this initial stage. He understands that a woman's wanting does not build from force, but from the room he makes with his steady presence. That is the reason the quiet of the correct man resounds more than the speech of the incorrect one. She isn't wanting you yet, but if she's seen you, the seed is already sown. And if you fight the impulse to hurry, if you allow her inquisitiveness to live, it will start to build by itself. Stage 2. Interest. Inquisitiveness changes the instant she understands she's considering you, even when she doesn't wish to. The look that once watched from a distance now starts to seek. She still feigns she hasn't seen, still acts composed, still attempts to remain in charge, but her mind keeps returning to that instant she initially spotted you. A woman's interest is like a spider's silk spun in quiet. She doesn't pursue, she permits. She permits her gaze to rest one moment more. She permits the smile to remain just a bit beyond its normal conclusion. She permits your name to resonate in her thoughts for no rational cause. At this stage, she begins seeking signals, not openly, but via her intuition. She considers if you've seen her, if you've sensed the unseen flow moving between you. But a woman never inquires. She arranges scenarios. She shows up where you typically are. She lets a remark fall that just you would grasp. She directs looks that state what her speech declines to. This is the point her form starts to heed her thoughts. Her pulse alters, her respiration speeds, her gaze exposes her even when her tone doesn't. Interest is the initial physical phase of wanting, and her form now conveys what she's attempting to conceal. She fusses with her hair, fixes her attire, nibbles her lip, lifts a cup to her lips. All minor motions, instinctual, unmanaged. Everyone a murmur from her nerves stating he's influencing me. But even now, she still withdraws. Because interest is the frontier, the narrow divide between intuition and logic. She desires, but she's still persuading herself she doesn't. She senses, but she shields herself from her own sensation. And it's now, in this delicate conflict, that a man either forfeits her entirely or stirs something much more profound. The average man responds instantly. He becomes eager, he hurries, he praises, he shatters the unseen cadence. And the interest fades, because the enigma fades. But the clear-headed man, the one who grasps this stage, does the reverse. He holds his cadence, he holds his poise, he holds his quiet. He doesn't show, doesn't pursue, doesn't hurry. He allows her to find out on her own what is occurring within her. And that is the way interest turns into captivation. A woman doesn't become enamored when she's met in kind. She falls when she doesn't comprehend what she's sensing. Because the unfamiliar nourishes wanting. And the man who understands how to exist in that ambiguity, without dread, without hurry, is the man she cannot erase. Have you ever seen when a woman begins to see you differently? That gaze she attempts to conceal but can't fully? Remark below, because that shift in her gaze is the initial signal that logic is starting to lose command. Stage 3. Fantasy and mental wanting. Everything that started as inquisitiveness and gradually built into interest now accesses the most potent domain of all, the thoughts. Because a woman's wanting, different from a man's, does not start with contact. It starts with the notion of contact. This is the point her mind assumes command, where her thoughts begin fabricating what life hasn't yet offered her. She starts to construct quiet scenarios, instances that might never occur, but are potent enough to nourish what she senses. She pictures his voice nearer, the gap closing, their respiration finding the same cadence. She pictures the look, the tightness, the potential of what it would be like to be close to him, without ever having been. This is the phase of mental wanting, the most perilous type of all, because the form stays motionless, but the thoughts have already yielded. And eventually, the form follows the thoughts. Now she starts to see all that brings him to mind: a fragrance on the breeze, an arbitrary tune, a specific hour of day. Each small particular becomes a catalyst, a quiet resonance of his presence. When a woman accesses this stage, she no longer wants the man before her. She wants the man she has fabricated in her thoughts, and that man is flawless, enigmatic, steadily poised. He gazes at her in quiet, and in some way grasps all she left unspoken. Fantasy is the holy terrain where a woman casts her perfect masculine, and from that instant, the actual man she observes is measured against the picture she envisioned. This is the reason the astute man never rushes. He understands that if she has pictured him, half the journey has already been covered. Because once a woman pictures, she links. Her thoughts respond to his presence even when he is absent. Wanting starts to live in the void, and the void is the most rich ground for the mind to flourish. That is the reason fantasy is both fragile and perilous, because the man hasn't acted yet, but he already exists in her mind. And when a man accesses a woman's thoughts, he doesn't require contact to be sensed. Her form already knows him. If you've gotten to this point, let me know in the comments, which of these stages do you believe is the most perilous? Because mental wanting is unseen, but once it anchors, it's the toughest to put out. Stage 4. Allure. Allure is the instant when thought ceases to be secure. Up to now, all existed just in her thoughts, quiet, managed, unreal. But now, the form starts to sense what the thoughts had only ventured to imagine. The mind attempts to fight, but the form talks a different tongue. A tongue more ancient than reason, more ancient than society itself. It's the unseen contact, the tremor that comes before touch, the look that rests too long, the respiration that alters cadence for no cause at all. This is the point. Command starts to crumble. Ideal, where the barrier between logic and instinct begins to fracture. At this stage, she is split. She understands she's being drawn to him, yet attempts to persuade herself she's not. She diverts herself. She shifts the topic. She eludes his gaze. But within her, the stirring is total. And when a woman stirs, there is no debate, no reason that can lull it back to rest. Allure is the terrain of split awareness. Her pulse quickens, her respiration fails, and she murmurs to herself, "Why am I sensing this way?" But no reply arrives because wanting is not logical. It doesn't request entry, it intrudes. She considers him when she rises. She senses the void of something she's never yet possessed. She battles against her own form as if it pertained to another. And it's now, right now, that most men ruin it all. The hasty man misreads her look for a clear path. He hurries, he compels, he shatters the cadence. And in that instant, her wanting fails. Because a woman's wanting cannot endure hurry, it flourishes only in tightness, in the gradual dance between peril and control. Allure is that peril, the narrow divide between desiring and opposing. The clear-headed man grasps the strength of that quiet. He doesn't shove, he doesn't seize, he bides. He understands timing is all. He understands allure is not evidence of command. It's evidence of faith being born, and faith is constructed via steady cadence, not disorder. Allure is the flame concealed under the ice. Outwardly, she seems frigid, poised, but within, all sears. She's ripped between the dread of losing command and the inquisitiveness of what might occur if she at last ceased resisting it. And it's right then, in that delicate room between dread and release, that wanting becomes indelible. Because allure is not the deed itself, it's the introduction to the deed. the instant when energy is at its height exactly because it's still held. And the man who grasps this fact understands he doesn't need to proceed to triumph. Because what a woman truly yearns for is not to be contacted in hurry, but to be sensed. With skill, with presence, with endurance, potent enough to make time itself pause its breathing. Stage 5. Command. After a lure intrudes on her, something shifts within her. The woman starts to grasp that the wanting which once governed her can now be guided, formed, employed. The flame that once scared her gradually becomes an instrument. The look, the grin, a quiet, all that once made her exposed now becomes her armament. Here, wanting ceases to be frailty and becomes craft. As she no longer desires just to sense, she desires to know how profoundly she can be sensed. And her form, now conscious of its impact, shifts with purpose. The advance is deliberate. The grin is weighed. Each word is set precisely, as though it holds an unseen meaning intended just for him. But be not mistaken. A woman's command is not aloofness. It is coordination. It is craft. She isn't maneuvering from spite. She's examining her own impact. She wants to affirm it, to know if he feels it, if he opposes it, if he responds the way her wanting foresees. The play becomes a dance. She incites, she retreats, she watches, she iterates, and with each shift the tightness builds, because nothing is ever completely yielded. This is the point most men falter. The average man fails under the force of her trials. He yields too fast. He attempts to appease. He passes over command, and with it, he passes over esteem. But the clear-headed man, the one who genuinely grasps the female psyche, sees the motion for what it is, a trial. He doesn't respond. He doesn't pursue. He stays stationary, not because he's uncaring, but because his strength is anchored. He understands that real masculinity is not about managing her, but about not forfeiting himself when she attempts to, and that is the thing that makes her esteem him. Because in that steady resolve, she feels something larger, skill, and skill unsettles her. Real. The command she believed she held begins to fade before his poise. It turns into a quiet clash between two contrary energies, the woman who aims to trial her strength and the man who shows his without ever lifting his tone. This stage is perilous, because now the woman is entirely aware of her own wants. She understands what she stirs. She understands what she incites. She understands she is the focus of notice, and she relishes it. But the more she commands, the more she becomes tied by her own energy, because wanting, once shifted into strength, ceases to be easy, and what was once enjoyment begins to feel burdensome. Have you ever seen a woman wanting you while feigning not to? When her gaze states all, her speech attempts to conceal. That is this stage. She's not anymore the woman who just watches, she's the one who trials. And the man who grasps this never vies for command. He doesn't debate, doesn't show, doesn't pursue. He just watches, respires, and permits the dance to progress. Because in the finish, command never pertains to the one who attempts to rule. It pertains to the one who doesn't require to show that he already does. Stage 6. Hunger and the urge to possess. There arrives a moment when wanting ceases to be fragile. Fantasy, command, incitement. All of it fades before something more potent. She no longer desires to picture. She desires to sense. She desires presence. She desires the heat of contact, the gravity of something actual. The form now talks more forcefully than the thoughts, and the woman that once toyed with flames now desires to sear completely. Inquisitiveness shifts into immediacy. The craving is no longer gentle. It's primal, intuitive, OIB. And it is not merely physical. It is emotional. She no longer desires the man for what he is. She desires him for how he causes her to sense. Her look alters. There is no camouflage remaining, no faking, no plays. She gazes at him like a person gauging the gap before traversing it. Each motion becomes a summons. The contact on the limb, the grin that rests, the quiet that resonates between speech. All that she does states, move nearer, but she never states it, because the most potent summons are quiet, ancient, unavoidable. This is the point most men go astray. They mix wanting with release, fire with profundity. But the clear-headed man grasps the distinction. He understands that even when wanting envelopes her, a woman still searches for security in his energy. She desires his contact, but she desires to understand what it is composed of. She desires to understand if his heat stems from presence or from need. If it is presence, she reveals. If it is need, she withdraws. Because a woman's craving is not coarse, it is spiritual. It's not the craving to be employed, it's the craving to be comprehended. She desires to sense that her form is viewed past its outline, in that her core is known, that her energy is accepted by a man potent enough to contain it. She desires to sense his poise in the center of disorder, his command in the center of intuition. Because what genuinely stirs a woman is not the contact itself. It is the skill inside the contact. At this stage, she desires to forfeit herself, but just in the palms of the man who does not forfeit himself with her. She desires the one who doesn't dread the flame, who holds it with silent strength. The man who can access wanting without losing bearing. Because a woman's wanting at this moment is sheer primal energy, and the man who understands how to manage it neither retreats nor exceeds. He just contains. And it is in that containment, that firm presence, that craving shifts into release. Because when the man stays complete, the woman at last dissolves and believes. And that is the point wanting becomes perilous. Because she no longer wants the man himself, but the sensation he stirs within her. And that type of wanting, the one that contacts her spirit, is the toughest to erase. Stage 7, fixation and the rule of wanting. Each flame that is not held eventually devours its own oxygen, and that is precisely what occurs when wanting shifts from a sensation into a requirement. The woman no longer wants only the man. She yearns for ownership over what he symbolizes. Her thoughts no longer pause. In what once was mild inquisitiveness becomes a ceaseless hunt. She seeks signals, a note, a look, a hint of his presence. She desires to know where he is, who he speaks with, what he's considering. But what she genuinely desires is to sense again what she sensed when he was close. That beat, that flash, that vitality. Wanting has shifted into deprivation. She's not pursuing him any longer. She's hunting a feeling that once existed via him. At this point, the woman has forfeited her anchor. She no longer pursues the event itself. She pursues its recurrence. Her form hurts for the comeback of something it cannot identify, and the man in her gaze stops being an individual. He turns into a sign of all she desires to re-experience, of all that made her sense vitality, wanted, whole. Fixation is the image of a forfeited anchor. It's the instant when wanting ceases to be a decision and turns into a psychological cage. She draws back, attempts to erase, but the thought comes back like a shade. She attempts to put it out, but her form recalls. Because recollection and wanting are built of the same substance, ideal. And the more she attempts to erase, the tighter her subconscious grips. At this moment, a woman's wanting stops being intuition. It turns into energetic reliance. She doesn't desire the man any longer. She desires the sensation he fabricates. She desires the reflection he symbolizes, the strength he stirs, the fierceness the world can no longer provide her. The fixated woman doesn't yearn for the actual. She yearns for the significance he provides her. She desires command over what she senses, but that sensation already commands her. It turns into a quiet battle between logic and intuition, between the dread of forfeiting herself and the enjoyment of persisting to sense. Fixation is love unsteadied, the sorrow of psychological reliance. She no longer adores the man. She adores the impact he produces in her, and that impact is habit-forming. She pursues him like a cure, even when she understands he's the toxin itself. The astute man sees this boundary. Ideal. He feels when captivation shifts into rule. He does not nourish the flame once it starts to consume itself. He retreats. Not from harshness, but from skill. Because real strength is not in being wanted, but in not being jailed by the wanting of others. The woman at this stage devours herself, and the man who grasps the pattern does not battle the flame. He observes it. He sees it sear, and when it at last becomes cinder, he does not ridicule it. He respects it, because all that sears too fiercely must at some point become cinder, so that it can be remade pure. And that is the point the clear-headed man moves away, not in rage, not in arrogance, but in calm. S. Because when wanting shifts into fixation, it's not anymore esteem, it's reliance donning the facade of love. The man who grasps wanting without being ruled by it. A woman's wanting is an old power. It starts with a look and finishes in a chasm. It does not request entry. It does not clarify. It does not alert. It just builds. And the man who falters in grasping that essence is at last devoured by its fierceness. But the clear-headed man watches. He understands that wanting is like the ocean. It can submerge those who battle against it, but it heeds the man who holds steady in its cadence. He doesn't attempt to stop the surge. He learns to stay upright when it breaks. Because a woman is built of currents, advancing, withdrawing, coming back, vanishing. And the error of men is attempting to manage the sea instead of learning how to respire inside it. Grasping a woman's wanting is not about deciphering it. It is about embracing its enigma. It is grasping that it is born from the unseen, that it nourishes on what is unspoken, and that the more a man attempts to clarify it with reason, the less a woman senses it with her form. Because wanting is not a formula, it is energy. And energy only esteems the man who has learned to esteem his own quiet. The man who commands himself is never ruled by another. He understands the allure of a woman's grace, but also the peril concealed in its magic. He watches the pattern of wanting with the poise of one who no longer pursues validation. And that poise itself turns magnetic. When a woman senses that, something within her moves. She starts to want him, not for his form, but for the calm he holds. Real masculine strength is not in stirring wanting, but in staying complete before it. Because the man who can stir wanting without forfeiting himself to it turns into what the modern world has erased, an anchor amid disorder. Same a man who senses, but does not submerge in sensation, who gazes at the flame and holds skill over the fire. He understands that love, wanting, and strength only have meaning when they are born from awareness. In the finish, a woman's wanting is lovely, until the instant it ceases to be a decision. And the astute man is the one who understands when loveliness has shifted into servitude. He doesn't escape the flame, he just understands when to move from it. That is real skill. Not command over another, but ownership of oneself. If this communication has resonated with you, join and follow the series, because here we do not speak of ploys or strategies, we speak of what makes a man steadfast, ideal, because in the finish it is never the most potent man who triumphs, it is the man who grasps wanting and stays complete before it.